Hello, this is Greg Gauss from Green Griggs coming to you on 21 March 22. Time on deck is 16:01 hours Central Daylight Time. We got a special guest today, Glenn Rhoades, who is the Operations Director for the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, serving with under Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, I've had on this channel many times, and I serve as the Alabama State Director of the same organization. So what we're going to do here is talk about the great success he's had in the state of Colorado, getting Colorado moving in this direction of getting our power grid hardened. Some of you may know Dr. Pry wrote this book several years ago, Blackout Wars, with the intention of showing why it's important to do this at the state level, since the federal level we've been stymied so much. And that's what we're striving to do, and we're getting some success here. And I think Colorado may be the model that we all need to follow. There's also success taking a different approach by Ambassador Hank Cooper, who I've had on this channel also in the past, a former director of Ronald Reagan's Strategic Initiative Defense Organization, SDIO, which is, you can probably knew as Star Wars. But anyway, so we've got the two apparently valid paths now toward getting our states to harden their grids. So pay attention. This is something you might be able to do or get involved in to get your grid hardened in your state to save us all, or at least something you might can support. We are working state directors in various areas with our group. We may have a few openings. I'll let Glenn talk to that a little bit, but I don't want to eat up too much of his time. Look, it is my proposition to help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive with this channel. And I think that my channel is second to none on YouTube for bringing you news and about power grid defense, news about that, and the best guest of anybody, of any channel size now. And there's some other channels that get some of our guests from time to time, but not like we bring here. By the way, I chaired 2 power grid defense conferences. I am an electrical engineer, and I also work system safety, so I know a little bit about these kind of topics. So we bring you the best expertise we can. Not saying we have all the answers, but we're certainly working it. So subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click all so you get more of this kind of content. I got a whole lot more coming at you just this week. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about ways that you can get involved with Colonel Tommy Waller with regards to saving our nuclear power plant spent fuel rod pulls from going up in smoke. What you can do in that area. He's got an excellent program for that. And then I'll be talking to General Ken Chrosniak again Wednesday. And we're going on. We got a lot of stuff to cover. So, by the way, just because things can get really bad really fast, and we know that right now we're at risk of war, perhaps with Russia. You buy that into that or not, with food prices and everything else is set to go up. Right now is a really good time to go to prepwithgreg.com, because I got $150 off of a 3-month supply of food that lasts 25 years. You get 2,000 calories a day, a lot better than a lot of the competitors that are giving you 800 calories a day, which is the starvation diet. So you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, a deal that'll make you a winner. 3 months is 6 of these buckets. Each bucket is 2 weeks. You get also $50 off of a 4-week supply. So great deals, guys. Check it out. Go to prepwithgreg.com. Links below that and some other promotions that I'm working with. Check them out. They might help you out. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now I give you my good friend and a guy who I'm following as best I can here in our grid defense organization, one of the 2 I support, and that is Glenn Rhoades. Glenn, tell us what you guys are doing up in Colorado and how we can follow your mode.
Well, thanks, Greg. I really do appreciate this time that I have with you guys. And just so everybody knows, you don't have to be a rocket scientist like Greg to be involved with us. We have people that come from all walks of life, and I mean that sincerely. And when I first talked to Dr. Peter Pry after I got awoken about the grid issue, I called up Peter and I said, "Listen, Peter, I want to talk to you and I want to work with you because I think this is a very important matter." And he just blurted out, "You're hired." And I said, "Well, listen, Peter, I used to have a secret clearance." He goes, "I don't care what kind of clearance you have. If you understand the issue, if you understand the severity of this problem, then we need you on board." And that's exactly the type of message that I give to everybody who wants to volunteer with us. As Peter often said, you know, we're building a ragtag army We don't have uniforms. We don't have fancy cars. We don't have fancy muskets. But what we do have is we have heart. We have heart, and we have a drive and a desire to save and to save human life. And it's not only human life. We want to save animal life too. In fact, we want to save everything that's living, whether it be plant, vegetable, mineral, anything that requires the flow of an electron to maintain its viability and sustainability is in our bailiwick. Okay. So Greg, again, I just want to thank you for this time together. I have a degree in architecture, believe it or not. And so in architecture, we're all about sustainable models. Unfortunately, most architects do not get into the energy portion of it. Now they are most recently with the LEEDS program and Southern Green Architecture. But what we're talking about here is much, much more serious and far beyond what most architectural schools teach in terms of our relationship with energy. And when you come down to it, energy is what gives us meaning in life. It's what sustains everything that we do. And the politicians of the future are going to have energy and should have energy as their number one campaign promise and campaign promises, because we all know that we are in a very dire situation where we have a lot of sustainability problems. And as of course, the Ukrainian war has underlined for us, there's a lot of infrastructure related to this. So if you get back to when I graduated from school, I went to work for an aerospace company, and I did basically, I don't know if you've heard of a CAP sheet, but it's cost accounting planning sheet for the engineers. So I basically helped the engineers stay on track. So 16 years at Lockheed Martin and Martin Marietta, working on the Peacekeeper missile, the MX missile, the small ICBM, the Magellan project, a whole bunch of different projects, the Barstow solar collector project. Those are all part of some of my background. Then in 2001, I ran for the 7th Congressional District State Board of Education. In fulfillment with our Constitution, we would have one State Board of Education person for every congressional district. I lost that race, but the National Science Foundation said I did a pretty good job, believe it or not. They called me up and said, hey, Glenn, would you like to help us with getting a nanotechnology lab built in Colorado at some university? I didn't know what that was going to be, but I worked with Senator Ron Wyden, who's a Democrat out of Oregon, and he helped write the 21st Century Nanotechnology Development Act. And so working with some of the people that he had with the National Science Foundation, we were able to get a nanotechnology lab built at the University of Colorado. And ever since then, I knew that science, I was really motivated by science, and I've always loved it ever since I was a Civil Air Patrol little cadet in high school, watching Maxwell Air Force Base films about the Titan missiles launching up in outer space, and my love for aviation. I knew that science was always going to be in my background. Well, fast forward to 2011, March 11th, when all of a sudden we had the Tohoku earthquake happen, and it caused a disruption, a displacement in a giant, long tectonic plate, which displaced billions of gallons of water. And as of course you know, over 20,000 people lost their lives in just a few hours. And the interesting thing was, as I read about it, I didn't really understand what had happened with Fukushima, but it did send shivers down my spine, because come to find out that the electrical technicians in Japan were frantically trying to pull car batteries out of their cars to bring them into the control room just to get a glimpse of what was happening in the reactor, because their instrumentation was gone. And so what had happened is, obviously, as most people know now, there was a breach of those diesel backup generators, and consequently the bulk power system, which caused the cooling rods to overheat and create all sorts of problems. So with that, I couldn't sleep for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I told my wife, Karen, I said, I've got to talk to somebody about this, because I don't understand what had happened. I don't understand. And I'm such a nerd, Greg. I knew that there were 120 million Americans that live within 50 miles of a boiling water reactor like Fukushima, all in the United States, right? And so I knew that if we had a loss of power for those nuclear power plants, many people would be in a world of hurt. So she said, "What are you going to do about it?" And I go, "Well, I don't know." So I did a Google search. I typed in long duration power outage, and it led me to a physicist named Dr. Daniel Baker. Now, Daniel Baker is the director of LASP. LASP is Laboratory in Atmospheric and Space Physics in Boulder. It is the university side of NCAR, which is a non-governmental nonprofit that's honed in on studying atmospheric conditions and everything. Well, the UCAR part, which is the University Center for Atmospheric Research, does a lot of programs with NASA and other things. So I called Dan Baker out of the blue. I didn't know who he was. I said, "Dr. Baker, I really need to talk to you about this thing." And I mean, hey, I'm just a little, private citizen, but he gave me the time. He said, "Glenn, come on up to the LASP office and I'll address any concerns you might have." Walked in there. This was in 2012. And I said, "Dr. Baker, I'm very concerned about the power grid. And I'm concerned about the relationship to power and nuclear power plants." And because I said, "Duh, I'm not a nuclear power engineer, but Greg, I always figured that if it's a nuclear power plant, it creates its own power, right? You have this false conception that there's all this stuff that's not interconnected, when in fact it is." And so I was just saying, "Hey, doesn't a nuclear power plant create its own power?" And he goes, "Glenn, in some ways it does, but guess what? It is dependent on the bulk power system."
Yes.
And I said, "Well, am I kind of reading into this like way too much? Because could the bulk power system cause these nuclear power plants in the United States to start running amok?" And he said, "Absolutely." And that's only the tip of the problem, Glenn. And I said, "Well, what, sir? I don't understand." He said, "Well, have you ever heard of an EMP?" And I said, "Well, yes, I've seen some movies, scientific movies that have it, and I know that Martin Marietta and I didn't know Lockheed Martin because we hadn't merged yet, but I know that Martin Marietta has some directed energy stuff that take out other people's power grids, and I know that EMP is part of that." But Greg, it's funny. You can, when you're in weapon systems, you really are not thinking that. You're always thinking about what it does to other people. You never really bring it back to yourself and how you could be vulnerable to this stuff, right? So that was kind of a wake-up call. And I said, "Well, yeah, well, what about it?" And he goes, "Well, Glenn, a nuclear bomb of the right design could in fact take out our entire power grid." And I said, "What?" I didn't understand that at all. I said, "How so?" And he then explained, how in Operation Fishbowl in 1962, we actually exploded a number of different devices. One of them was a thermonuclear device at 1.44 megatons in the upper atmosphere above the Johnson Atoll, about 800, maybe 750, 800 miles southwest of Honolulu, Hawaii. And he said that when that thing went off, it created an ionization of the atmosphere. Basically, it knocked off electrons from upper atmospheric gases. Those electrons started spinning and interacting with the Earth's global magnetosphere and caused an ionization of the atmosphere. And it created tiny little radio waves that came down at, I think the ones that hit Hawaii were like 5.2 kilovolts per meter, something like that. And at the time they thought, "Oh, that's not very much, no problem." But then, Greg, when they started doing the math, and they said that the same bomb exploded over the continental United States would create something more like a 19 to 20 kilovolt per meter overcharge, then people started waking up, right? They started saying, "We got a problem."
Let's explain that, Glenn. It's because as farther you go north, the more the magnetic field lines of the Earth converge. So the farther north this occurs, the worse it's going to be. Now, you took the United States, the geographic center is roughly in Kansas, but someone targeting the United States for a maximum EMP strike will probably hit right over Nebraska.
Yep, that's exactly right. So the challenge that we have as members of the EMP task force is people say, well, how much is it going to cost? What kind of damage is it going to be? And that is really an albatross around our neck, because a lot of the damage that happens with something like that, a lot of it is modeled. There's a lot of factors, including the height, the altitude, the design of the bomb, whether it's an EMP super weapon or whether it's just a regular nuclear bomb, not a thermonuclear bomb. All those have different characteristics and effects on the grid. Plus the architecture of what we have on the ground, buildings, rebar, everything. So it really adds a level of complexity never before seen, right? But he basically said that a couple of Telstar satellites went through that ionization cloud in the upper atmosphere, and they were destroyed 2 or 3 days later, after the bomb had already gone off. So there are some residual effects that happen, and I didn't know any of this, Greg, until I started my journey in 2012, and I became more and more interested and studied it more and more in the science. And there's a lot of different complexities. I read the EMP congressional report and all these different things. But he stopped me and he said, well, Glenn, even though this is a factor, he said, do you know how it really affects the power grid? And I said, well, not really. I mean, you're talking about this radio wave thing. How does that work with the power grid? And then he started to say that we have a complex grid that was invented by, combinations of Tesla, Westinghouse, and Edison. And at the time, it was pretty simple in a lot of ways. And with the expanding country, we decided to go with alternating current as opposed to direct current, which meant that the direct current was where the lines were going to be a lot smaller. And obviously Thomas Edison developed the first direct current microgrid at Pearl Street Station in New York City. But they opted for the alternate power grid, alternate current power grid. And what that did is it added another level of complexity that was unknown to those early grid builders because they didn't factor in the extremes of electromagnetism. And he said, this is where it really gets pretty crazy, because everything that we do for the alternating grid is all dependent on what we call our Achilles heel. And that are these big, giant 300 and 400 step down and step up transformers that are all over the country, probably close to 2,500 big units, and it may be a little bit less, but they're manufactured in different countries. We do have some manufacturing capabilities here. We had none at the time when they were first coming out. We're all dependent on outside power. We're trying to reverse that in some ways, but the problem is that if these things go out, because as you know, the grid has to be tuned both phasing wise, voltage wise, frequency wise, and it just hums. It hums. It's kind of like keeping a hot air balloon. It's got to be exactly balanced to keep it going. And if there's an anomaly, it can cause a twitch in the thing. And these anomalies can be so severe that would cause axles in the generation systems and the turbines, even if it's a hydroelectric dam, to bolt and buckle. And the lead times on those are incredible. But more importantly than that is if you have an anomaly in these big giant transformers, like what was shown in the Aurora project that Idaho National Labs did, it will cause the transformers to overheat, and eventually they could explode. Now, if one of these things explodes, we only make about 200 per year for the whole planet. We lose maybe 2 or 3 per, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 per week or 2 or 3 per month. I'd have to check on that. But the problem is that when we lose one, there's a lead time that happens. Anywhere from, it could be anywhere from 15 to 12 to 15, 24 months, depending on how big they are. And that's where we run into a problem. Because if they explode, the logistics for getting them from the factory to the substation is incredible. A lot of these are old designs that are wearing, just from the lack of life cycle. For every 13 I think for every 10 transformers out there, there's 13 different basic designs. And a lot of those drawings have been lost. They don't even exist anymore. Plus, you have the other logistic problem of a lot of them were laid in when we had railroad tracks and we had special cars that could go up to the substation, drop them off. Those railroad tracks don't exist anymore. So there's a lot of different factors that come in. And Dr. Baker was very clear to tell me, you've got to understand, Glenn, that we can't survive that long without those transformers. If it takes even 2 months, can you imagine a whole city without having transformers for 2 months? It's almost unfathomable that we've put ourselves in that position.
Way to put that in perspective is look where we're at today with labor shortages and our supply chain, how it's already disrupted. It's hard to get people to hire and get into places, get things done. Now, what's going to be happening is all this is occurring according to the Congressional EMP Task Force. 9 out of 10 people would be dead in a year due to societal collapse. So while the whole time you're trying to order this stuff without the benefit of all your communications, your grid, your power, your electronic money to order it, if you could put in an order, which I don't see how you're even going to be able to order it, but if you could put in an order, and it takes a year to 24 months to get it, most people just say 18 months. But if it takes that long to get it, then by the time you get it, 9 out of 10 people are gone.
Yeah.
And what's left is fending for their lives and survival. So how do you if you could order it, do you get this thing installed? And how do you order it in the first place? To me, this is Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall. I don't see how we put it back together and come back to anything that we recognize in our lifetimes. I think it's going to take decades to rebuild.
Yeah. And, I have a good graphic of that. I tell people, it's kind of like you're at a firehouse, and you hear the alarm bell go off and you slide down the pole. And guess what the first thing is? It's not getting into the fire truck. The first thing you do is start designing your fire truck. And you got to figure out how to design it, what it's going to look like, and everything.
That's kind of where we're at. I thought you were going to say that the fire was in the firehouse. Slide down the
that too. Yeah. Start designing your fire truck, because it's going to be a while before you design the fire truck to put out the fire. So it's really crazy where we put ourselves into that position. But then he said, but I've got some other bad news for you. And I said, you mean there's something worse than that? He said, yeah. So we're talking about the continental United States, where we could lose 9 out of 10 Americans, right? What happens with a coronal mass ejection? And I go, what's that? He goes, well, every once in a while, the sun will spill out a coronal mass ejection, which is basically magnetized plasma, about 1 million miles long. So I always tell people, it's kind of like if you take a beach ball and put it on the 31-yard line, okay, that's 93 feet away from the goal line. Take a beach ball, 31 yards away, put a beach ball there, a yellow one to signify the sun. Then on the goal line, you pull out a $5 bill and pull out the pupil of Abraham Lincoln and put that on the goal line. That's the size of the earth. And then at 3 inches away, you got a smaller dot, that's the moon. Okay, so what happens is every once in a while, the sun will peel off a giant magnetized glob, often called a magnetic flux rope. And the reason they call it a flux rope is that thing is morphing across the solar system. It's traveling at about 5 million miles an hour. Okay, so it'll take about 17 hours to get to us. Now, there was one, the August 2020 or 2012 superstorm that was clocked at about 7 million miles an hour. Okay, so it got to us a lot quicker. It's the fastest CME ever recorded. He said, Glenn, what happens is that thing goes morphing and traveling across the planet. We don't know what the polarity is because it morphs and twists. Well, when it hits Lagrange point 1, which would be 1 foot away from that little dot on the goal line, that's 1 million miles out. That's Lagrange point 1. That's where we have a lot of our SOHO and other solar observation satellites. And when it hits one of those, it relays the polarity back to Earth. And if it's got the same polarity of the Earth, there's kind of a glancing blow, or kind of like two magnets with the same polarity. They kind of just repel each other. But if it's switched, it will draw that current in, and then you cause a wobbling between the Earth's geomagnetic characteristics and the geomagnetic sphere that's around it, and they both start interacting and cause electrons to flow. And at that point in time, Dr. Baker was very clear to point out, Glenn, it wouldn't matter if you're on the bright side of the sun or on the dark side of the sun, it would destroy all the transformers all over the planet. Then you would have a culling of the human race at you know, again, 9 out of 10 people. Now, we know that probably there's about 66% of the Earth's population that live in these giant mega cities, right? These urban centers like Mexico City, you know, Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco, you know, Denver. So those big giant urban centers are going to be the most affected by this, because that's where electricity has allowed us to super extend the carrying capacity of our urban environment. So people are dependent there. That's where you have the societal collapse. If you're an Aborigine and you're out on the plains of Mali and in Africa or Zimbabwe or something out in the country, you're probably not going to feel the effects too much because you don't have electricity to begin with. Those are the people that are going to survive because they've learned to interact with the land, right? And there's kind of a balance there. But what I tell people, like, for example, if Elon Musk ends up listening to this podcast, I would tell him, Elon, you're not going to achieve your space utopia unless you solve the planet, because we won't be able to have enough time to get you to colonize the Earth or colonize the moon or Mars in time to do that if we're all dead. So take a little bit of your billions, give a little bit to the EMP Task Force, help fund us, and get the power grid going, get the power grid solidified so that we can have a balanced and successful future for humanity, right? So that's going to be a huge problem if we get hit by coronal mass ejection. Then he went on to say there's also things like directed energy weapons, which are little canisters of things that are capacitors that pop and discharge and recharge and discharge and recharge over 100 kilovolts per meter. Now, it's really, really a strong force, but it's a lot less localized thing. And you're not using a nuclear bomb. You're just using some energy storage and energy capacitors to pop it off. So there's a lot of different ways you can destroy the grid, you know, destroy the power grid. So fast forward to 2014, when I took I took a state representative and I said, listen, and her name was Representative Joanne Janelle. She's a Democrat out of Colorado. She's my hero. She's one of my heroes. She said, Glenn, we need to work on this. And Joanne Janelle was one of the first ones in the whole state. She's got one of the few ones that has a doctorate after her name. She was the first one to really understand the implications. So Joanne Janelle, we had Dr. Baker, we had George Baker, we had Peter Pry, Tom Popick, John Kappelman. Everybody converged on the Capitol, and they didn't do it. They didn't pass it. They didn't. For one thing, the power company said, hey, this is a national security problem. This isn't our problem. Why are you coming to us? Number two, we got bigger fishes to fry. They're trying to get us to convert from coal to natural gas. And you want us to be worried about this? And we said, yes. Why? Because the implications of non-action is going to kill millions of Coloradans, okay? That's for starters, okay? And you don't have the assurances that you can't have a 9/11 happen in your backyard concerning the power grid. So what are you thinking about? No, they didn't want to do it. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 months later that a lawyer came up to me and said, Glenn, all that other stuff was it's just smoke and mirrors. This is smoke. I go, well, what was the real reason? Well, the real reason is because of the status quo, of they're comfortable with what they have. They don't want to work with anybody. It's like you have playground toys and you don't want to have anybody touch your playground toys. And what we've done here with a bill called the Colorado Critical Infrastructure Protection Act is we said, listen, power companies, you can keep your toys. Keep them. You just let us take those toys and harden them to military standards so that we will make your toys better. And you can still keep them, but you got to play with us. We've got to port over stuff that's already proven and effectively off the shelf and allow us to put them into your toys to make them resilient for the greater sake of the community. And guess what? Governor Polis, and I'll say it right now, it's on his desk. I don't know why he's not doing it. Greg, he has the opportunity to be one of the first governors to actually move this thing forward. It's a complete package because you and I know that this stuff doesn't happen overnight. If we were to get Governor Polis right now, and this is what, March of 2022, if we were to get him to say, and get us to say, hey, Glenn, we want to work with you, let's launch this thing, it would take 24 months of hard engineering, systemic designing to create the architecture to make the Colorado power grid resilient. Then at the end of 24 months, the really good thing, Greg, is at the end of the 24 months, we would have definition finally in the whole United States of saying how much is it going to cost to actually deploy work crews to do it, of how the equipment is going to be installed, how it's going to be maintained, and all that stuff. It would move the whole country one step closer to definition instead of us pulling everything out of, and you've heard it before, everything from $2 billion to $950 million to just harden the city of Houston, Texas. But at that point in time, we'd have some definition. Why? Because you've got some engineers who are not looking at just a kumbaya, let's ask the public where we need to put these things, you know. I go, no, we have to be smart about this. It's a systemic problem. It's an engineering problem. And that's why the engineers that I have working for me, they're chopping at the bit to get at this thing, Greg. And I have to say, we're not there yet, but you will come into play at some point in time because a systems engineer understands the interconnection and the complexities of what we have here. It's not just talking about a resilient microgrid, Greg, or it's not just talking about putting up some barriers on the coolant tanks of these transformers. And it's not only putting a shunt here and something else here. It's talking about an integrated solution that we can have to do what? Just keep 90% of the population at least alive. Because what we've done is we've identified water, wastewater, so that you can pee and defecate, okay, without having to worry about cholera and diphtheria, which is going to kill the most amount of people. We will have an integrated system to harden 5G communications. And as you know, I tell people in the state of Colorado, listen, your Colorado State Emergency Operations Plan will go nowhere. You will not be able to unleash the whole racehorses because it's all dependent on electrons for any type of response. If you don't have communications, you don't go anywhere. And the other thing too is, Greg, as you know, we cannot initiate or deploy a plan if we have to figure out what we're going to do. I mean, it's just like saying we're going to figure out how to launch the lifeboats on the Titanic when the thing's sinking. So that's not a time when you bring out the manuals and try to figure out how to put people in there. We are not practicing emergency response like needs to be practiced in this catastrophic situation, right? And that's another thing that happened is when they locked it off there, we thought we'd do an end around and say, hey, well, let's approach it from the emergency management point of view until we found out, hey guys, you're asking us to do something we just can't do. You're asking us for a command and control document. Yes, we are. Well, we don't have the capabilities of that. And you know why, Greg? Why? Because in Colorado, if you look at the Colorado State Emergency Operations Plan, I can't remember what page, it's like 250, it says that all incidents start and are solved locally. So that means politically, the only way you can approach an incident is when there's a wildfire in Colorado. The sheriff is the political appointee that's in charge of the incident manager with his part-time emergency manager. He reports politically to the county commissioners. And there's a dynamic that goes on there too. to unleash the resources to take out the wildfire, right? When it crosses political lines, then all of a sudden they enact the Colorado State Emergency Ops Center. And guess what? Xcel Energy goes there, Tri-State Electric goes there, Black Hills Corporation goes there, and the National Guard goes there. And all they do is they divvy out resources as the different 2 or 3 sheriffs say, hey, I need this stuff here. And that will work with 99% of all the incidents, Greg, but it won't work with what we're talking about, right?
No, not
And
at
you
all.
know that. Talk
Not
to
at all.
them about that. It's amazing. None of the plans will work with these super incidences. And there's a couple of them that you can think of right now: a pandemic, a bioweapons weapons unleash, and a coronal mass ejection and/or a HEM. Those things super exceed anything that we have in the United States right now.
So,
And I told them, I said,
for the
pardon?
listener, let's define hemp. Hemp is high altitude electromagnetic pulse for the purposes of this discussion, not something that grows in a greenhouse or out in the field.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that none of the plans that we have in the United States deal with the most catastrophic things. So I tell everybody, hey, don't destroy your Colorado State Emergency Operations Plan, because that will function for 99% of all your emergencies, but they will not function with what we see today. And that was the reason why when COVID came out, nobody was talking to each other, Greg. Nobody was talking to each other. So we really feel like if people want to go to our website, www.emptaskforce.us, and click a little red box in there that says this is a public grassroots movement, and that directs them to Governor Polis to say, Governor, please, we want to make you a hero. We want you to be a hero, even though I disagree with a lot of the stuff that's on his political platform. It doesn't matter. What he does with this will trump everything that I disagree with him on, because we won't have an opportunity, Greg, to address any of the other issues if we're all dead, right? And there it is. Click to download that citizens movement letter. Absolutely.
So everybody can see this. I will put the link in the show notes and the pin notes, emptaskforce.us, and just come and click here to download the citizens movement letter.
Yes, and we have until about mid-April, maybe the beginning of May, to actually do this. And I'm telling you, I'll be on his bandwagon. I really will, even though I disagree with a lot of the stuff he has, because what we understand, this is the most important thing he will ever do. And if he ever wants to do something bigger, for his political career, maybe be a state senator or something, this will really look good on his resume. And everybody in the nation will be looking to Governor Polis to say, you know how to address a bipartisan issue that will protect humanity and protect everybody in the nation. And that's something that's really good.
Look at this, guys. Right here is the email. Anybody that lives in Colorado can send this email. If you have friends or family that live in Colorado, send this to them and have them send this letter to this email address right here. And you can find this, once again, by going to the EMP Task Force and clicking that red box. I'll go back there to show you again. Right here, it's emptaskforce.us, and click this red box right here, and it brings up that letter. That's all you got to do. Send the email to that address. Presto changeo. You might have saved the state of Colorado and set precedents for all the rest of the states to follow.
Absolutely. We can make Jared Polis a real hero for us. We really can. And I know a lot of conservatives are going to be down on my case for saying, how can you do that? He's bad. Well, you know what? Again, this is the most important issue that he could ever address, and we're not going to have to worry about anything else.
This transcends
the abortion issue or anything else if we're all dead, right?
Bingo. This transcends politics. This is staying alive. This should not be a Republican, Democrat, left, right. We all want to live. We want our kids to live and our grandkids, and we want them to prosper. So, like I said earlier, my proposition is help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. So this is surviving and thriving.
And Greg, I want to call out one other hero that I have, and that is Senator John Hickenlooper, who's a Democratic Democratic senator from Colorado. And you know why? Because long before I came on board with this issue, he actually created, and you can look it up, the Colorado Energy Assurance Emergency Plan.
Wow.
Now, I've looked at all the emergency plans in the entire country, and what John Hickenlooper created is got to be the best one, because what he did, and it's a volunteer program from the Department of Energy, it asks us to do a Colorado profile, okay? But here's the real beauty of it. It has a topology section, an all hazards topology section that includes EMP, high altitude nuclear bombs, directed energy weapons, everything that could take down the power grid, and he put it in that document. Now the 2012 version and the 2016 version are like gold. When it comes to the latest one, the 2021 version, it's like everything else. It's like, it's getting worse instead of better, right? We need to revive the old stuff that really showed what was happening and how to guard against that, okay? So what happened is when Xcel Energy and Black Hills Corporation, when they wanted to do a grid modernization program here in Colorado in June of 2020, they said that the best way to do it was to have a balancing authority and be able to transfer and buy surplus energy from different grids around us, right? So that was all good. So I met with Mark Gabriel, who was then director of WAPA, which is the Western Area Power Authority, kind of like the TVA there. I met him and he said, Glenn, are you for this bill? And I go, yeah, kind of. I said, but it doesn't do the engineering security stuff that I need. And he said, well, not to worry, because FERC and NERC has got it. Everything that we do with FERC and NERC will give us the assurance that we need. And I said, I beg to differ. Mark. FERC and NERC won't do it. They're just not set up to do it. So what happened is he went in to testify. Then I went in to testify. And guess what the Colorado legislature did? Their energy subcommittee actually put a resiliency clause in the transmission authority that said anything that you do to modernize the power grid has got to be in compliance with the Colorado Energy Assurance Emergency Plan. That was huge, and it's only 2 or 3 sentences long. And so what I tell Governor Polis and everybody and all the bureaucrats down at the State House and everything, and all the representatives and senators is, guys, they're not in compliance. This RTO, which is allowed them to sell and buy surplus energy, is only part of the solution. We need to make sure that we have engineering buy-in, and we have an oversee board that basically tells the power companies they need to make sure they mitigate for all these hazards. And that's one thing that John Hickenlooper did. And he also got the town of Rangeley $5 million for a hardened microgrid. It's not hardened right yet, but the town elders and the town city council and the mayor and the town manager, Jocelyn Mullen, basically had the foresight to say, wow, you mean we can be up there with a microgrid that doesn't exist for the public? And I go, yes. It's got to be engineered, but you can do that. You can go in that right direction. And bless his heart, John Hickenlooper, my hero, put in a $5 million earmark to the town of Rangeley to do that. And that is a huge first step. Now, whether or not they do it, we got some people in places there that can kind of oversee it and make sure they're going the right direction. But that's good news, because we know that if we do the microgrids are good if they're hardened, but they got to be engineered hardened. They can't have parasitic attachment through smart metering and stuff that allows them to parasitically share malware into the bulk power system. That's not good. So it'd be better if it's autonomous, and they have to work on what NREL says is a future emerging problem, and that is keeping the grid balanced as we parasitically attach more electrical cars charging stations onto the grid. There can be some anomalies there at the top of the grid just from use, just from usage. So
Amen.
We feel like that cogency microgrid project, along with the Colorado Critical Infrastructure Resiliency Initiative, paired together, even though they're 2 separate projects, could actually be a win-win. And we wrote the bill, or not wrote the bill, but we wrote the proposal that Governor Polis needs to turn into a bill to be generic enough that if Governor Polis wants to punt the ball, he wants to say, you can have it, you run with it, I'm not doing anything with it, then we're going to have it be caught by either the governor of Montana, maybe Wyoming, Florida, Utah, who have all already said, hey, come here, okay? Because obviously you guys aren't smart enough in Colorado to do it. And that's not a good thing. Because I know Jared Polis, he's a very smart guy. He can do this. He's a graduate from Princeton, for crying out loud. And I've talked to him. I know him. He's a smart gentleman. He just needs to do it. And again, I can't emphasize enough. I'll be in his bandwagon. I'll be in his parade float. Just do it. So I think that's about it. I'm kind of all tuckered out. But if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty comprehensive. So I just want to again mention everybody to go to the task force website that I showed. It'll be in the links, and click on that red box and get that letter. And if you're in Colorado, use it. If you've got friends in Colorado, send it to them. This can save your friends, and it can be the hey, take it and modify it. And maybe we can work and get this started in our own states. Also, you can look through there for the leadership sections of the website, figure out how to contact Glenn Rhoades if you're interested in getting active in your state. So
there's two final things I want to say. Number one is it's a complex issue, okay? And even though Jared Polis might say, gosh, the power companies are not going to want it, whatever. But I'll tell you what, if we move in the right direction, even if we pass this thing and it failed, it will be a step forward. Because what we're hoping to do is if we pass it as legislation, and we don't even have to tap into Colorado taxpayer money. There are some grants out there at FEMA, the Department of Defense, that can actually fund this totally from federal money, which is good. But not only that, it's complex. So we're not going to force the power companies to do anything. They have to be partners with us. We're going to make sure that whatever stakeholder important factors are necessary for their survival and economic viability, we are going to support them 150%, Greg. And not only that, we will appreciate and guard their security, their electrical grid security matters, because the way we wrote this bill is it's going to be a DOD vetted top secret, contractor that appreciate the enormous complexities and sensitivity of top secret information, because we certainly don't want to let anything that could compromise the power grid, black start capabilities, other things that I certainly don't need to know about, but we know that the DOD engineers will work in conjunction with the power companies to work on that. And then lastly, they will be probably Xcel Energy, Black Hills Corporation, and the Interstate Rural Electrical Association, and probably Tri-State Electric will probably be the most advanced, forward-thinking electrical utilities in the WAPA, in the Western Area Power Authority, in the whole nation. So with that, thank you.
Sir, you're making great progress. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for your leadership in the task force, running our telecons, pulling us all together. I know it's hard. It's like herding cats, and I'm probably one of the worst cats in the herd, but I'm definitely.
You're great. Have those listeners send this podcast to Jared Polis and say, Jared, you need to listen to this. It's going to make you a hero.
Share this video, people. Share it, especially with your friends in Colorado, and send this video to the governor. Let the governor listen. Also send it to Elon Musk.
Yes.
Because guess what? I chaired two power grid defense conferences, but they were sponsored by the Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society, a local chapter of the National Space Society that I started way back in 1983 for the exact reason that you stated, because it was the recognition. Guys, you're not going to space if you don't have a power grid. That's what I told them.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, God bless you.
So Elon, hey, I already had this occur to me years ago. Wake up, Elon. We got to have this. It won't cost you nothing, almost like a couple beans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks
All
a lot, and I'll sign off here. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate it. And hang on for just 1 second when we end the video.
Okay.
All right. To all my audience, I want to say thank you for watching. This is something you can take action on, and we can make a difference here. Again, thank you so much.